Hello, I'm John, and welcome to the second instalment of the Green Label podcast, part of the Green Label project, Changing Nigeria Together. I'm joined by Shayon, Naya, and Ayo over the phone. We're coming to you from the URY studios here at the University of York. In the podcast this week, we're talking about issues on the upcoming elections, and should be talking about the issue of zoning and the PDP, the People's Democratic Party. So what is zoning?
Zoning is a method of power sharing that is used in Nigeria, whereby positions of elected office are rotated between different ethnic groups. In this case, it's rotated between the North and the South in regards to the position of the president, so that, in effect, every 2 terms or every 8 years, the position is rotated between a Northerner and a Southerner.
It's basically been the process in Nigeria which power sharing has been based upon since 1970.
How does it work in practice?
Nigeria is divided into 3 major ethnic groups, Yoruba, Hausa and Igbo. And what zoning does is gives all 3 ethnic groups equal power sharing. In quotes, it's supposed to promote equity in Nigeria, because we had Yar'Adua, who was the Northern Consensus aspirant, who was the president, and Goodluck Jonathan, who was the vice president. So that, well, to me, I think that was zoning in practice, which also produced a president and a vice president.
Sharon's right. So the zoning process produced a president from the North, immediately following after a president from the South, who was Obasanjo, the president from 1999 to 2007. And in theory, the Yar'Adua presidency was meant to last 2 terms till 2015, but due to his untimely death, there's now been an issue raised. But that's how zoning works in practice. Basically,
speaking in layman terms, zoning is just basically power sharing amongst all the ethnic groups and giving them equal time or equal say in power sharing.
So where did this process come from?
Well, zoning in Nigeria sort of has pre-colonial roots. It's to do with how the country that we now call Nigeria was formed. Nigeria existed as two separate protectorates under the colonial era, the northern Nigeria and the southern Nigeria. And when the 2 were amalgamated in 1914, and eventually when the country gained its independence in 1960, there was a situation created where the people of the north, predominantly Hausa Fulani people, had a simple majority. They consisted at least 50% of the population. So there was a sort of feeling that if democracy was left to just run, then there would always be a northern ruler. And so there was sort of an agreement after about 1970, after the civil war in Nigeria, there was sort of an agreement that power should be rotated so as to prevent the elite from competing against each other based on ethnic lines. There would sort of be a rotation system that would prevent this.
That's exactly how we could say zoning came into practice, because zoning was supposed to be a solution to a problem which has now, well, I think it's morphed into more of an issue now.
So you feel it was originally intended as more of a short-term
solution? Yeah, a stopgap.
Because in 1967 there was a feeling, especially after the 1965 elections, that the North was way too powerful, and it sort of created a feeling of unease amongst the other minorities, the eastern and the western regions in the South, and eventually it led to, well, along with some other things, it led to the secession of Biafra and the war. And so after the war, there was sort of a feeling that instead of, ethnicity being a competing factor in elite politics, instead of the elite having to compete against one another, they could sort of, rotate, your turn, my turn sort of thing. And that would prevent, at least in the short term, any sort of conflict.
Coming back into the whole discussion, I think, first of all, my major problem with zoning, or with the issue of zoning, has to do with the fact that it was brought about as a long-term solution, using a short-term solution in place of a long-term solution. You get what I mean? So, to me, I think it's taken too long. It's overstayed its usefulness.
Well, in the modern era, since 1999, PDP, the People's Democratic Party, the biggest party in Nigeria, and so-called biggest party in Africa, has instituted this concept of zoning internally within the party, sort of an informal system of rotation based on 2 terms, that each region, the North and the South, would get 2 terms. And that's where the modern concept comes about. Although they haven't actually put it in the national constitution, zoning is not part of the constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's an agreement within the People's Democratic Party.
And do other political parties within Nigeria have a similar...
Well, it's unclear to tell, mainly because of the role that the PDP plays. But it's important to note that in 1999, when Obasanjo came to power as a southerner, theoretically following Shehu Shagari, the last northern, democratic president, the opposition party fielded a southern candidate with a northern vice president. I think Olufalaye was the southern candidate fielded by the opposition. So I think if the other parties aren't explicitly saying the zoning is in place, and
in practice they're actually accepting it.
In 2007, when the opposition parties, the AC and the AMPP, both fielded northern candidates, as so did the PDP fielded northern candidates. So I think,
very true.
At least implicitly, they too practice zoning.
So does it affect unity?
To me, I think zoning has overstayed its usefulness. It's now a solution that has overstayed its usefulness and now brought about another issue. Yeah, because basically, if we're going to stick to zoning, then very soon, as we can see now, we're going to have square pegs in round holes, which is already happening. In promoting unity, that shouldn't be what a country should be about. Zoning, probably in lesser elections, but we're choosing a president, we're choosing someone who stands as the whole Nigeria. But if we take away zoning and bring in credible people, we do not care where you're from, we do not care who you are, credible candidates who will deliver, then I think that should be how presidential elections should be run.
Okay, you raised some interesting points, but you have to see that Nigeria is a country of 150 million people, 340 ethnic groups, or whatever the number is, X amount of ethnic groups. Okay, the fact that there are 150 million people means that even if we do zone, there will be qualified people from each of these ethnic groups. Are you telling me there are no Hausa people who are capable of being... I mean, if we decided arbitrarily to pick any tribe, you could probably find a man or a woman who was sufficiently qualified. The issue, that's not the issue to do with qualification of the candidates. I mean, the issue is to do with the fact that there are so many different groups. There needs to be a sense of representation, at least at the highest level of government. I mean,
but if a country is going to be built on that, Nigeria is a country that's going to go on and on and on and on and on. Is this a phenomenon which we want to carry on forever? Will the country really be united in future? Will our grandchildren see Nigeria as one Nigeria or as a Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo Nigeria? Could you please answer me that question?
Yeah, it's quite simple. That the state of Nigeria doesn't all of a sudden become Hausa when a Hausa man becomes president. When Yaradua was president of Nigeria, however short it was, Southerners weren't running scared for their lives. No, but when Obasanjo was president, Northerners weren't dying in masses. Nigeria has passed the stage at which it's a competition for living. It's more to do. And that's what zoning provides. It's no longer competition between the ethnic groups. It's an agreement. It's a system.
So Ayo, hearing all what we've said, could you just tell us what your viewpoint is on how zoning has affected unity or how it affects unity?
Let's not forget, zoning started from the result of the South clamoring for the fact that the northern atmosphere or northern parts of Nigeria were actually dominating Nigeria the most. And the principle of zoning started actually from them. And during '94, during General Sani Abacha's regime, he actually asked for a national constitutional conference, which he produced a draft constitution that created 6 geopolitical zones and the rotation of power amongst the 6 zones as the nation's building strategy.
Okay.
And he had a draft constitution then, and that was when the first official seal of the concept of zoning in Nigeria was actually made known to people.
Okay, so by that, are you saying it was brought into the constitution of Nigeria or brought into the constitution?
It was brought into a proposed constitution.
A proposed
constitution, and because it was during the military regime, and military regime, everything actually went without anybody arguing with the
Yeah, we all remember then.
Me, I'm not that old. I don't remember that.
Yeah, but now the zoning is actually more of a PDP factor now, because I believe other parties in Nigeria don't even believe in it anymore.
From all the candidates and the way we see the candidate choosing, I believe you will also agree with me to say that zoning is actually has actually been incorporated into the way political aspirants are being chosen.
Yeah.
So will you then say that zoning isn't then adopted by other political parties?
Yeah, exactly. You actually could say it's scripted to everyone's mindset, yeah, but not everyone still really believes in the fact that we should be imposed with a certain leader.
Okay.
We actually need competence in Nigeria, not zoning.
Okay, so basically,
that's what Nigeria needs.
Okay, so
Ayo, I'll ask you a question. Say you're from the Niger Delta and you feel that the country's wealth is sort of resting on your back. You're from the area of the country that provides oil and gas and sort of keeps the Nigerian economy running. Okay. Yeah. Yet in the 50 years since independence, Goodluck Jonathan is the first person to be president of the country who comes from the Niger Delta. Do you not feel that that you never have the ability, because politics is run in Nigeria on such an ethnic basis that people vote based on ethnicity? It's a fact. Do you not feel that it's unfair that you will never have the opportunity to be president purely because you come from a place that does not have as many numbers as some of the other tribes?
I do agree with everything you've just said. Makes perfect sense. But my own problem with where I don't seem to tally with what you're saying is, yes, zoning is a good thing. The way Nigerian politics might not actually be the best to actually promote quality and true democracy. I'm trying to look at Nigeria in the next 30, 40 years. I want to see Nigeria as a proper country, not a country that has built its democracy on, will I say, sellotape. We need a democracy that has properly been built on proper ideals, not a short-term solution that we keep on using.
What you're saying is that it would be okay if zoning was written into the constitution.
Oh, no. What I'm trying to say is it will be okay if zoning was taken out. And then, in as much as, yes, Nigeria might fall into a state of problems. Right now, everybody believes zoning is the answer. But to me, I don't think zoning is the answer. And the reason why we still believe zoning is keeping Nigeria together, I do not think zoning is keeping Nigeria together. I think zoning is just closing our eyes to the main problem.
Okay, let's not forget this here. Zoning is actually healthy. The argument or debate for zoning is healthy for our democracy.
Yeah.
That's what I actually believe. But we must seriously look into the issues of competence. Like I said before,
I agree.
need leaders who are enlightened to build our country.
Very true.
Leaders who are patriotic to the nation and who believe in the verse of the national anthem.
Yes,
and the national pledge.
I agree with you, but I would.
The time has come for Nigeria to become part of economic super blocks and utilizing our time on basic economic issues, rather than a nation obsessed with the debate of clamoring for who's going to be the next president or where is the presidency going to.
I agree with you that zoning is a bit of a red herring. That there are things that could be done, but at the state that Nigerian politics is in, where presidency is really a do or die affair, and for whatever reason that is, maybe due to the constitution or whatever, but until we can reach a level where everybody has equal access to the position of the president, to the higher positions because let's not forget, zoning doesn't just affect the presidency. There are implicit terms of zoning for civil service jobs, for vice presidencies, for cabinet jobs, for all sorts of things, until people can have genuine equal opportunity or equal access to positions of power. I think zoning is something that must genuinely persist.